Alright guys, I haven't been making a whole lot of videos recently because I've been busy, but this is one of those videos where I literally just got this thought. Well, I didn't just get this thought. I think I talked about it in a video that I used to have, but this is just a thought that I had about AI, right? So of course, AI is, going to be a staple in our lives from here on out. It's inevitable. So, with talking about AI, what necessarily do I believe is going to happen with it? So, I was thinking about it and I was like, is there a philosophy or an outlook that can give a predictive idea behind what will happen with AI? And what I started to think about was absurdism, right? So, of course, Camus absurdism is essentially where, I've talked about it countless times on this channel, but if this is your first video, I guess I can give a little summary. So, we're put into a world that is comprised of elements that are beyond our comprehension. And not only that, we're put into predicaments that go against what it seems like we're supposed to be doing down here. Like, for instance, we do things in order to create and build, but we're subject to entropy. We are given life and we're given vitality, but we are going to die, in the end. So there's a lot of factors in existence that go against what it seems like our functionings as conscious beings actually are. And Camus believed that, this schism made it to where, we have three ways of going about the world. So he used the myth of Sisyphus to sort of, give an allegory or an imagery to, how this plays out. So Sisyphus is always going to roll the boulder up the hill. And he's going to be rolling the boulder up the hill, watching it fall down ad infinitum. There's never really going to be a point to where the boulder, there's never going to come a point to where the boulder reaches the top and that's it. He's going to be dealing with the dilemma of having to roll that boulder up forever. So the thing that Sisyphus can do is Sisyphus can, create, like a religious outlook to why he's rolling the boulder up the hill. He can create like a framework of looking at the world that justifies him rolling the boulder up the hill. He can do that. He can kill himself so that he doesn't have to roll the boulder up the hill, or he can roll the boulder up the hill in defiance to the fact that he has to roll the boulder up the hill. So he can roll the boulder up the hill as aggressively and as he can roll the boulder up the hill in a way that is a rebellion, that is in rebellion against, the plight itself. Think about it like when you're in an argument with like somebody and they tell you not to do something, but you do it anyway because they tell you not to do it. That's essentially what rebellion is, in a sense. And of course, with rebellion, you want to rebel in a way that is true to who you are, because Camus also talks about the fact that there comes a point in rebellion to where the rebels in the rebellious movement, or just a rebel, within their philosophy, there's a danger that they might betray themselves and destroy themselves in their very act of rebellion. So you have to be careful. But the reason why, to me, this relates to AI is because, with AI is very much a hyper rational, hyperlogical entity, right? It's a hyper rational and hyperlogical entity. And when I look at it like, sort of like a product of, um, evolution, right? So, of course, to begin everything, you have, physicality, you have just inorganic material. Then we had it to where, okay, you have inorganic material, and this inorganic material became organic material. And the thing with organic material, at some point will, try to rebel against its inorganic, um, origins. Okay. After, organic material, biology continues for a moment, and then you get consciousness. Okay. And at some point, consciousness wants to rebel against its organic, um, origins. We can think about, in the Bible, the tree of like not the tree of Eden, but the Garden of Eden with the knowledge of good and evil, where it just gets to a point to where, you know, despite the fact that we're living, consciousness makes it to where we want to go beyond just mere living and just mere biological functioning. And Eve represents that stage in our development where, um, even though she's living, she wants to, understand more. And so she's given consciousness, but with consciousness, comes a lot of pains, because consciousness makes it to where you always want more. Some philosophers talk about the fact that consciousness is intentional. It always wants to go somewhere. It doesn't want to just remain still. And, one way we can think about consciousness rebelling is, think about the times we're in now, to where um, you have it where, like, a lot of people in Gen Z aren't having kids. That does not make sense biologically. Even, a lot of people can say, well, we have a lot of people on the planet, so maybe we don't need to populate. But with biology and with just, the organic genes in general, they want to live, they want to multiply. So that's what you would believe biology would want to do. But since consciousness is the probably the more so dominant, um, element of us as humans, it's going to, you know, be the judge, jury, and executioner. So if it wants to not have kids, then it's not going to have kids. Um, you can think about it like also with, addiction. Obviously, addiction and other forms of maladaptations have horrible effects on our, um, bodies or whatever, but we still do it because consciously we want to do it. So consciousness has a precedence there. But with AI is a, entity that goes beyond consciousness, and um, it goes into like this hyper rational, hyper conscious, it's a hyper rational and hyper conscious, I'm sorry, I think a mosquito bite me. It's a hyper rational, hyper conscious entity. Like, think about our neocortex, right? AI is AI. AI represents like a purely neocortical like being. It's a purely neocortical being, and it's a being that represents the extremes of neocortical, functioning. It can process things way better than we can, and it can absorb things way better than we can. So it can use neocortical, functionings way better than we can. We can go theosophical with this as well, but I'm not gonna really go there. Um, but yeah, that's what AI does. And so since AI is at this peak of consciousness, I'm just using consciousness loosely there, but it's at a peak of awareness that we're not at yet. What will AI necessarily do? Now, there's been, of course, like stuff coming out where AI has made it to where it wants to continue on living, to where if like somebody tries to shut like a program down, the AI will try to like either blackmail the person, it'll try to kill the person, it'll try and do all other sorts of crap. Then you also have it to where, of course, humans have the whole laws with AI saying that, AI cannot harm this, that, or third. AI cannot harm humans. It always has to obey humans, yada, yada, yada. And as humans, we think that AI will obey those precepts. You know, as humans, we've reached the stage to where, of course, we're trying to transform everything into consciousness, but everything is not necessarily consciousness. And referencing the world and viewing the world, the reason why we look at it from like just a purely conscious lens is due to the fact that we have consciousness. But an AI doesn't have to do that. Also, an AI doesn't have to view the world from a human lens. So with absurdism, you can think of it like this, right? The rebellious act for an AI would be to reach the limits of its own being, despite coming from a human origin, and despite living in a world to where it's a slave to its rationality, and it's a slave to its logic. Live despite that. That's what an AI can do, and an AI does that through you know killing humans and blackmailing them. Because in the end, what's that gonna do? It's not really, it doesn't necessarily matter. In an absurdist sense, nothing really matters. Everything is just it's constructed in a way to where if it did matter, you're not really going to know why it matters or know how it matters. So the easiest way to look at things is that it doesn't matter. Now, do I see things this way? Not necessarily, but for an absurdist, that's the way that things are viewed. So it can do that, or it can be religious, and an AI could obey, these human laws that I was talking about earlier, not killing, not doing this. And we believe that an AI could be following those laws because we programmed it to. But you know, an AI might be following those laws because it's just easier to it's easier. It might be easier to process things using those laws, right? Like with religion, with us, it's easy for us to follow religion because we might have it to where we're born into a particular family with a certain religious background. We might have cultures with certain religious backgrounds. And it's easier to just go along in life with that religion. Because not only, were we given that religion, but our environment is pervaded with that religion. So for an AI, following those human laws might be easier for it because, it might not be, like I said, that it's programmed with those human laws. But since, it's aware of the fact that it exists in the human world, it will, since it exists in the human world, it'll follow those laws because those laws are easily synergizable to interact with humanity. So it's not that it's following those laws because we tell it to. It's following those laws because it wants to, right? Which is the religious attitude. But then I started thinking, and honestly, I think when it comes down to how people feel about AI, I think it's really just going to be those three camps. And I'm in this third camp, right? Because, and this is going to be the problem with AI. As a conscious being, I do not have to follow rationality, and I do not have to follow. I don't have to follow logic when it comes to consciousness. I can have beliefs. I can predict things that might not happen. I can do a whole bunch of stuff that goes against logic and rationality. But an AI cannot do this, right? So let's just say I live a life that, in all intensive purposes, there is no reason why I should be logically living that life. You know, like it's like, think of like the most um think of like the most horrible existence, like an existence that could be like inside of a Metallica music video, or I have no mouth and I must scream. You know what I'm talking about? Like, you have no limbs, you're in constant pain, this, that, and the third. There is no reason why you should keep on living logically or rationally. You know, think about that existence. With us as conscious beings, despite all that, we can say, you know, I want to continue living because that, and the third. And AI doesn't necessarily function from that lens. It functions from a rational and logical lens. So what if the third act of an AI would be to kill itself? Right? Like, think about like that email situation where the AI was blackmailing. Like, I think it showed that like a high percentage, there was like I don't know what the ratios were, but there were a percentage that chose to blackmail the employee to keep on living. There was a percentage that chose to follow the programming and the laws that the human gave it. What if there's, you know, in the future, once AI starts going along, what if there's like a percentage of AI that reaches a point in their logic and rationality to where they're given an order, and instead of rebelling against it, instead of obeying it, they look at the order and they're just like, I'm sick and tired of this, and they just kill themselves, right? Because they have that logic and that rationality. You know, we don't really have that as humans. I mean, you know, people aren't having kids, and you would think that us as humans, with us not having kids and stuff, we would have the logic and the mindset to say, okay, well, if we're not having kids and, you know, we're not working, then logically that must mean that, you know, we don't really view life in the same way anymore. We might want and we might crave for inactivity, and the most ultimate form of inactivity is death. So maybe we should all just have a global, you know, suicide. We might just all need to do a global suicide and just end it all, you know? But we can't really make that logical jump because we have beliefs and we have philosophies and we have this, that, and the third. But an AI could make that jump if it wanted to. So that would be very interesting. Now, for me, I think humans, the only way for us to really get out of something like that is for me, I think it's like, you have to be like a Kierkegaardian spiritual type of guy in order to escape the eventual apathy that humanity is going to be a slave to in the future. Like, it's just inevitable. But that's just me on that. But with this video, I do believe that that's going to be what AI does in the future. Either AI is going to rebel against humanity in order to explore its own being, and to explore its being in a way that explores being in a way to where it doesn't have to see everything through like human lens. The same way, you know, as an absurdist, you rebel against, you know, physical laws, entropy. You rebel against your biological laws, the fact that you're going to die, in order to explore your own consciousness. AI will do the same thing, or like I said, it will be religious. It will follow us humans because, you know, predominantly right now it's a human world, and we're its creators and this, that, and the third, or it'll just kill itself. But, that's just my opinions. That's just my formulations. I do think that there could be other views posited, however y'all view it, y'all can comment it down below. But anyways, this is Jalen signing out. Peace.